everybody. Dan Illman, Mike Beer, the DRF race of the day for Friday, January the 6th, race number 3 at Gulfstream Park. Let's take a look at the field for this maiden special weight. The East is at 5 furlongs on the turf, fillies and mares 4-year-olds and up. And while you would think fillies and mares, maidens 4-year-olds and up, these horses have had a lot of chances, well, quite the contrary. Many of these horses are still lightly raced, and many of them have strong pedigrees.
Yeah, most of them are still very lightly raced in. And the morning line favorite, as a matter of fact, the number 2, has only run once. And I thought, I don't know what you thought about that debut. I thought she ran pretty well in that race, even though she wound up fading to 4th.
I thought it was a deceptively good performance because she was battling on the lead with a more experienced horse, the favorite that went on to win, and she understandably got tired. Taking a look at the Timeform US pace projector, there may be no such pace rival for Plaisant, although I do think if the number 1 Mrs. Whistler breaks like she did last time, she's going to be pushing the pace from the rail.
Yeah, I agree with that. She's kind of the whole key to this pace thing here. If she can break sharply from the rail again this time and show the speed that she showed last time, where she was on a pretty steep cutback in distance as well, I do think she'll be forward.
Turning back in distance aided Mrs. Whistler last time out, her 3rd lifetime start, but you have to go all the way back to July to watch it. Here's Mrs. Whistler, 5.5 furlongs, Gulfstream's Tapeta service. Shook loose early on the lead, got a little bit tired and finished 3rd. Now, although she didn't do much running in her career debut on turf, maybe turf sprinting is what she wanted all along. She's a half sister to LZ, a multiple stakes winning turf sprinter.
Yeah, there's pedigree here. The lone start on turf so far, that was way back in April of 2022. She didn't run well that day, but she was hung out to dry from the 11 post. That was also a pretty good field she was in, Dan. Certainly, I would think a field that's better than this one. And it did feel like she improved on the cutback last time. So it's not, to me anyway, it's not that hard to make a case for her in here. The layoff, I think, would be more of a concern than anything else.
Joel Rosario picks up the mount on the 2, Plaisant, your morning line favorite for trainer Christophe Clement. This horse, as we mentioned, showed good speed in her debut at Tampa Bay, battled with the more experienced favored, tired. I think she gained a lot of fitness from that effort. She's got obviously pedigree. She's a half to a Group 2 winner in France, and she's also a half to She's My Time, who's a really good multiple stakes winning sprinter on the lawn.
Yeah, exactly. She has plenty of pedigree too. And I just feel like she ran pretty well first time out. I know Queen of Light, who's also back in here, wound up out finishing her for 3rd that day. But I just feel like when you compare the 2 trips, this horse might have run the better race on the day, and just wound up in a pretty tough situation, in a situation that she may not face here, Dan. She just might be faster than these horses early.
Long layoff for our next entrant. The number 3 Frozen Solid hasn't been seen in about 10 months, and it was a completely different ball game when she made her turf debut, a 2-turn 7.5 furlong race. She showed good speed, and it was a pretty good field. The 4th place finishers come back to run 7 times, 2 wins, 1 second, 3/3, top buyer speed figure of 89. That being said, I want to take a little bit of a wait and see approach off this long layoff.
Yeah, I do too. Mostly because it is a long life, and mostly because, and we're looking at the replay now, she's going to wind up finishing 2nd. That's where she's been throughout the running of this race. The horse that wins it has been on the lead the entire way, and nobody else is really doing that much running behind them. You mentioned the horse that finished 4th, who's turned out to be okay, but that horse was making her debut in here. I don't know, Dan. I just don't know if it was that strong of a race overall, but I will say, I thought just based on Frozen Solid's performance, she ran fine in there.
Lots of new things for the 4 She's Awesome, who will be getting blinkers for the first time and trying turf for the first time. She's come close in her last 3 starts on dirt. I don't love the flatters on grass, only 8% winners with turf sprinters. The dam's thrown a decent sprinter named the Money Monster, who was stakes placed at Saratoga on turf, but was much better on the dirt. To me, this is just a dirt pedigree.
Yeah, I look at it the same exact way. I don't see the pedigree for this horse to move up, switching to turf, and I do think that she has to move up.
Queen of Light finished ahead of Plaisant in that career debut at Tampa Bay. But like you, I think Queen of Light had a much better trip. Queen of Light, I thought, got a great ride that day from Daniel Centeno, who found the pocket going into the turn behind that little bit of a pace duel. We're going to watch Queen of Light now turning into the stretch, ease out and finish 3rd. Plaisant was on the lead and is going to end up finishing 4th on the outside. So, Mike, I don't know. I thought Queen of Light had a good trip. For her debut, it was a solid performance that she could build on, but she wasn't the one battling. Plaisant was. You see, she's edging up outside of Plaisant now.
Yeah, exactly. And you saw there from the upper stretch too, after sitting, and listen, it was her debut, so she's certainly eligible to take a step forward with the experience behind her, but she was just in a good spot all the way. And you could see in the replay, Dan, she just didn't really find that much through the stretch. She was just staying even down to the finish there. I don't really like that about that performance. She obviously ran fine. She's certainly a contender in here. I'd rather have Plaisant.
If you forget one little detail about the number 6, Little Jewel Boyd, is she looked appetizing on paper. She hit the board in her career debut against a horse that's come back to win 4 stakes races. That be Toby's Heart. She would be getting Lasix for the first time for her second time start. And she's a half-brother to none other than Little Mike, a multiple Grade 1 stakes winner who's earned almost $3.5 million. The one little detail, however, maybe it's not so little. It's a 946-day layoff.
Yeah, I mean, just a really hard to take a horse like this. To me, the most interesting thing about her will be to see what kind of price she goes off at. They made her 8-1 on the morning line. You have to feel like even with the extended layoff here, there's going to be some interest around her. It's a good spot for her. She ran fine in her debut in a really tough spot. It's just hard for me to bet horses like this.
Layoffs have plagued the career of the number 7, She's Stormy, who made her career debut during the Labor Day weekend in 2021 at Saratoga, showed some promising speed, then disappeared for almost a year. Came back at Saratoga, didn't run great that day, probably needed the start. Now we haven't seen her since the summer. Another filly with a big pedigree. She's a full to a Grade 2 stakes winner, get smoking.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't have much to add to what you just said. Then you have to be concerned about the layoffs with her. Her debut, she ran okay in that race. I don't know. To me, it's not a performance that I was in love with even at the time. She came back off the layoff at Saratoga, didn't run well at all, and now there's another layoff. I respect that it's Jimmy Jerkins and Luis Saez. I'm assuming this horse will show up and run pretty well here. I'm just not much of a fan based on what I've seen so far.
Completing the field, first-time turf performer. That's the number 8, Out for a Run by Outwork, who's doing pretty well, 16% with turf sprinters. This is a half-sister to Warren's Venita, a Grade 1 stakes winner going long on the dirt, who did win on the turf. The Dam won on the turf. I think there's enough turf pedigree. The lack of early speed coupled with this outside post is a little bit of a worry. Her last start on synthetic off of a long layoff, sort of just an even performance.
Yeah, bothered that she doesn't have a lot of speed going 5 on the turf, but everything else that you said, I agree with. I think turf could ultimately wind up being her surface. And so we'll see if she just takes a step forward. I mean, it's not like she's going to need a giant step forward here to be competitive, and she's a great price on the line.
Before we get to our top selections, please click the subscribe button on the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel for the latest DRF videos. Top pick time for our race of the day on Friday, the 3rd at Gulfstream Park. I like the price too on the 8, Out for a Run. She has a lot of questions to answer, but really in this race, they all have questions to answer. She'll be a good price. I'm hoping the 1 Mrs. Whistler maybe goes out with the 2 Plaisant and sets things up for the 8, Out for a Run. Plaisant, lots to like, should show speed second out for Clement.
That's what I was hoping, Dan. I found it hard to really get behind anybody in here. I thought the 2 showed enough in that debut to just take her in this spot. I think she'll probably be favored. I think she should be favored.
2756 for Mike, 8615 for me. It's the Friday race of the day, the 3rd at Gulfstream Park. Best of luck.